There we go. All right, so I have a few comments about
Even before.
I mean, really. So, okay. So the focus, I'm going to actually focus on what I heard from what Clem was saying about empowerment. And the first thing that related to empowerment, the first thing that I got very clearly was there's a growing number of kinds of PHRs. And this is a really good thing for patients because they can have a choice of a lot of different kinds of tools. I've not heard the phrase linking before, which I thought was really interesting. And I think that is a whole set of aggregation patterns. These could occur through DOTSI, they could occur through HealthVault, but there's a fundamental alternative that's available to patients that gives them some power over linking things. That what's critical from the patient's perspective may be services and data content, not just the data alone. So that the idea that a personal health record empowers a person to do stuff like get an appointment is as important as to know stuff. That the doctors are worried, and I say that with all recognition that they should be worried, because there is a gotcha mentality still in U.S. healthcare that says if you could have known that, if a reasonable and prudent person would have known that, then you're the stucky and you are in big trouble if it's in there and you didn't know it was in there. Now, I think there's ways around that, but I think it's a very realistic and very important issue to be dealing with. The critical point about the linkers, which I'm not sure this is something that will facilitate or interfere with empowerment, but the lack of data standards and the authentication challenges not being solved are institutional concerns. Patients might still find a great deal of resource to understand their own health care, and participate in it through these systems, even if we don't have data standards in them, and even if we don't have good authentication systems. So to the extent that an institution might be more willing to engage with patients who had access to this data, that is, for example, let patient source data come into the institution, these could be directly they could be indirectly influencing empowerment. Now, Clem didn't exactly say that. I'm beginning to editorialize already. So Clem said a couple of wild and crazy things. He said patients like me was a PHR, and actually I think it's pretty cool to think about patients like me as a PHR. The fundamental concern I have with sources like PHRs, sources like patients like me being considered as a PHR is a little bit a wild and crazy thought, which is that if we have a data store that's not interoperable with any other data store, can we really think it's going to assist patient empowerment? So that's why I thought it was a little crazy. The pointing out of the California Healthcare Foundation survey, with only 7% of 1,800 people using, was, to me, a wild issue. In the sense that that's a very, very small percentage, and I suspect there's a framing issue with the question there, because there's pretty good evidence overall that patients are keeping track of information someplace. They might not be using an electronic PHR, but they've got records, they've got little tags inside the cupboard in the kitchen, they've got PHR type information around. But this issue about trying to make sure information is correct, this is an old issue, that patients verifying what's in their clinical record is actually a long-standing and well-recognized important role of the patient. Looking at your medication list in part helps you say, no, I'm actually not taking that birth control pill because I'm 58 years old. And so helping to clarify what's in the record and validating it, I think, is something that we should actually think of as a way for patients to be empowered about the accuracy of their data. And the long anticipated but still not ready NLM PHR fits, I think this is a really important message to keep saying over and over again. It fits with the mission of the NLM to be doing this, and I don't think that that's actually widely understood even within the medical informatics community. And that, not surprising with Clem, for those of you who don't know Clem, he's brought the emphasis on standards through our field for years, and this has been really important, and that this is probably, as far as I can tell, the only PHR that's a standards-based PHR. Not that I think standards are good still, I'm not sure they're needed, but I appreciate that this one's there. And the user interface enhancements were thoughtful about what users might be able to need. Now, in terms of what happened in the conversation after the formal remarks, I thought there were some very interesting points that came up. The focus and support for NHIN Direct is really an important issue from the perspective that I have. That is, that there is an alternative communication pathway built on the email protocol that allows for data integration in ways that don't require flowing through a formal EHR, that don't limit patients from accessing data electronically to only those places that have large-scale EHRs. And I think it's an empowering tool for patients that actually is starting to get some traction all over the country. So I was glad to see that. But I couldn't tell if you were linking to NHIN.
Well, let me clarify. So this is just It's just a very, very dumb tool.
Right, it's just a
And
pipe.
it isn't necessarily structured, at least in the NHIN Direct. It'll take a payload.
Right.
And then you send it somewhere, but the parties have to work out the addressing and the certificate stuff.
So actually, the reason why I pulled the structured messaging there is to be able to say that it has the capacity to handle structured messaging, and why this is important to patient empowerment is that this is the first pathway for electronic contribution of patient source data into the electronic record. That now that we have this, and it depends on how it's implemented, depends on the protocol that's set up, it depends on the state that's implementing it. But for the first time, there's now a way to get patient source data into an electronic health record.
This should be really enabling for health information.
Yeah.
As well.
Well, it might kill them. Yeah.
Or between, no, I don't think so. You need a place to put it. There was one other piece about it. So this is a push method.
Yes.
And the NHIN Connect is a pull. And the NHIN Connect, I worry they'll never work.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't have much hope on it either. I mean, in its current configuration. I like the question then, the discussion about who's really benefiting from the NLM approach and the issue that this is patient-controlled information. That sounds like a trite statement to be making, but in fact, the stories that patients tell about their lives, Chris told us this morning, people experience healthcare in stories. The fact that there is an electronic tool that allows people to tell a standards-based story about their health is a really pretty important step. There may need to be additions to it for different kinds of patient source data, but the idea that patients control the information is often thought of as, I can hide stuff from my doctor. But what the NLM approach is taking, and it's the first time I've heard it this way, the NLM approach is taking is giving patients a more powerful tool for telling their story.
So to be fair to Ken Mandel, this was really the premise of the Indivo personally controlled health record that they put out 5-7 years ago.
No, so to be fair to Ken Mandel, the concept is, but they actually are not a standards-based model. They want all flavors of data. The wrapper model was there. So no, I think the concept doesn't go to Ken. Ken gets that, but the implementation is something that it would be nice to see Indivo be able to take that, because the problem with receiving Indivo data through Indivo back into an EHR is that what is it?
So it's going to be shoebox. But in fairness, Indivo is working on trying to understand. But the thing is, you got to get the whole world to do it.
Right. Well, you'll see that in the next page. So the other questions that came up, will the NLM PHR, will open source code be available? That's a very good thing. Very good thing. Where's Deborah? Very good thing, right? Will the data be, will the NLM PHR be open to the whole country? And I actually wondered if that meant the whole world. Do you think because the Chinese, I'm confused about these Chinese guys coming in.
Just copy it.
Well, maybe they're anyway, and then data can be exported in spreadsheets and PDF can be imported. It's trivial. It's a step. It's not as big as I want, but PDF can be exported too. Well, that's good. So to address the agenda, Les has asked us to look at micro, meso, and macro issues. Did I get that right, Les? Okay, so the micro issues that we need to find a suite of services needed and desired by patients. So patients really want to be able to make appointments. They really want to be able to know at what point, when did I have that last surgery? So timing things in sequence as opposed to knowing with the actual content of the record is really important to them. Will people trust the government with their health data? This is huge to me. This is not small. And is there anybody here from, except there's people from Georgia, but anybody here from further into the south or southeast like Alabama or Florida? There's enormous distrust of government when it comes to health data. So I don't think this is small, and I think the idea of having the open source solution that might actually reside outside of the government's hands is really great. And the question I don't know who asked this question, but what do you get for what you put into this is really good, because this is an entirely, not only is this patient controlled, it's patient contributed. I mean, it's patient type data. So there's some questions that I saw really more operationally. I think this is a basic good for patient, but there's a lot of operational questions that need to be asked about it. And I am actually concerned about the lack of connection with a care provider, the lack of a pathway to that connection. But next generation will fix that. The meso.
Maybe it's micro, but I would submit back to the point of patients wanting accuracy. My own focus is on the medical history.
Yep.
Where the patient is the subject matter expert in the first place.
Right.
And with our very first patient interviewing, when the patients took a look at the summary that was being printed out, they wanted to correct it. That's
Yeah.
not exactly what I meant.
Yep, I want it to be different. So the idea of having an opportunity to extend the dialogue and get more accurate dialogue, I appreciate that. And I'll change that before I send my slides off to Les. Miso, institutions really have to work with their clinicians to hold them harmless for hidden but helpful facts. And it might not be to protect to expand their liability coverage, for example, but might be generating for the ER doc some kind of knowledge management tools that actually helps them figure out, are there keywords to be looked at, are there sections to be looked at, is there sequence, something. This is a non-trivial issue, and we can't stick it on the clinicians alone. We have to actually look at institutional solutions for it.
That's an issue with HIEs as well that physicians are concerned about.
Yes.
It's the same issue.
But the issue that I think is
They don't want to see what other doctors order.
yeah, no, I know they don't. They're
So the work, managing HIE, way, 10 times, 100 times the information that you're putting into the record is coming in from other sources.
right.
So how can you actually be responsible for all that?
Well, I don't. Well, we did one.
So does everyone here know what an HIE is before we get too jargony? All the HIE. So you know what that is, because I think it is an issue that there's a flood of data that could be coming from everywhere. The challenge from the patient is the patient's right in idiosyncratic terms. Nobody else has seen it. Whereas the stuff in the HIE, at least there's a perception that somebody else laid eyes on that once, and so the backup isn't there. So getting institutions to accept patient source data, very big challenge. It has legal issues, it has computational issues, and frankly the value add for the clinical practice is not held by the clinicians. It's a value add that the patients perceive, and trying to shift that power structure is going to be big. Creating a chain of trust for the data. I think Danny's group is going to solve this, right? Isn't Cisco working on trustable data flowing through its pipes? Sort of, yeah. But being able to, and when I say chain of trust, I don't mean that the data meets the same standards regardless of its source. I mean the data is as a person put it in, and then the clinician gets to decide on that. Does the federal government provide a safe harbor? Could a data repository like this lead to better knowledge development and knowledge management tools? So I'm envisioning if we really had half of the United States data in this PHR system, what we could do for understanding the course of care would be phenomenal. But I don't know if I want the federal government to do it.
Well, it doesn't.
George Mason is fine.
It doesn't provide a safe
No, it doesn't provide a safe harbor. And then the macro issues, policies that protect and enable, and this is something that some of the people in this room are already involved in, and we need to be more involved with those. And I think there is research that can be done to support policies that are creating protections around privacy and implementing privacy policies in technical ways that are more powerful than we currently do, but also that enable exchange, enable access, and enable sharing. Data standards that make linkers useful. I just thought that was an important throwaway to Clem. Sorry, but the idea that we have to have standards for everything has to be tempered with the fact that there needs to be priority standards for certain things. And then finally, the macro issues, what I think is societal, and largely I think it would be government facilitated, is harmonizing rules, including whether or not PHRs really belong in a HIPAA protected environment or not, and supported community contributed standards, because there will be some standards, either presentation standards like the CCR, CDs, the document, or the standards for communication or the standards for device-to-device input that I think do have to be mediated at a national level. And that's all I have to say.
Could I just respond to standards for just a minute? So I don't believe, and we're not going to code everything.
Thank you.
We should have text available almost anywhere you want. But a lot of the stuff comes out standardized. It's just the local hospital standard.